Welcome to the Deep Dive. You know, this is where we take a whole stack of sources, articles, research, all our notes, and we try to boil it all down, give you the most important bits, the key insights, so you're really well-informed, but without getting totally overwhelmed. Today, we are plunging into something massive, a really tumultuous, world-changing period, the French Revolution, roughly 1789 to 1799. And this wasn't just, a political shift. It was like a societal earthquake. It fundamentally reshaped France, and honestly, the ripples went global, changed how we think about liberty, equality, popular sovereignty, all of it. So, our mission today, we're going to cut through the frankly huge and often confusing historical record. Try to give you the clearest picture. We'll look at what sparked it, the key people involved, the wild turns it took, and its really powerful, sometimes contradictory legacy. Think of it as your shortcut to understanding one of history's biggest turning points. Ready to jump in?
Absolutely. It's a fascinating, complex story.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Before the storm really broke, what was France actually like? What were the conditions that made revolution seem, well, almost inevitable? Our sources paint a pretty grim picture, starting with a massive economic crisis.
Oh, definitely. Samrag was basically drowning in debt. We're talking billions of livres. Billions.
Where did all that debt come from?
Mostly from costly wars. Think the 7 Years' War and then pouring money into supporting the American Revolution. That cost a fortune.
Right. Irony there, helping found one republic while undermining their own monarchy's finances.
Exactly. And layered on top of that was just unbelievably extravagant spending by the royal court. Versailles wasn't cheap.
And the tax system didn't help, did it? I mean, it sounds completely broken.
Broken is a good word. It was incredibly unfair. The burden fell almost entirely on the commoners, the Third Estate.
That's like, what, 98% of the population?
Pretty much. While the clergy, the First Estate, and the nobility, the Second Estate, they paid hardly any taxes. They had exemptions, privileges.
You can just imagine the resentment building up over generations.
Absolutely. And then, like pouring gasoline on the fire, you had terrible harvest, especially in 1788, 1789.
Which meant food shortages.
Severe food shortages.
Yeah.
And the price of bread, the absolute staple food for most people, just skyrocketed.
I read somewhere a stat that in Paris, by 1789, the average worker might spend nearly 88% of their wages just on bread.
That's right. Imagine that. Almost everything you earn just to get enough bread to survive.
It wasn't just hardship, it was desperation, a real recipe for rebellion.
So you've got debt, unfair taxes, starvation.
And what's truly striking here is how these things weren't separate issues. They all tangled together, The debt crisis made the tax burden feel even heavier. The hunger made the social inequalities seem even more unjust.
It created this really volatile mix.
Exactly. The economic hardship just cranked up the pressure on those existing social grievances, pushed people right to the edge.
But was revolution inevitable?
Yeah.
Some historians argue maybe not, right? That's a key debate. While the conditions were undeniably terrible, some argue it wasn't set in stone. They point fingers at the monarchy's failure to adapt. Louis XVI, well, he wasn't exactly decisive.
Indecisive, resistant to reform.
Yes, and the aristocracy clinging desperately to their privileges, especially refusing tax reform. That inaction, that resistance, it kind of left this dangerous power vacuum.
So individual choices or lack of choices really matter.
Hugely. It raises that big question. How much was it vast historical forces, and how much was it down to specific decisions, specific moments of weakness or stubbornness from the people in charge? Human choices played a massive role.
Okay, that makes sense. It wasn't just abstract forces, but, suffering alone doesn't always cause a revolution. What about the ideas, the intellectual fuel? The Enlightenment must have been huge here.
Oh, absolutely massive. You can think of the Enlightenment as providing the language, the framework for all that discontent. Well, you had philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu. They weren't just having academic debates. Their ideas about liberty, equality, popular sovereignty, the separation of powers. These directly challenged the legitimacy of an absolute monarch ruling by divine right.
So challenging the very foundation of the system.
Precisely. Rousseau's idea of the general will, for instance. It suggested that political authority comes from the people, not from God or inheritance. That was revolutionary. It gave the Third Estate, the vast majority, a kind of philosophical justification to demand power.
And these ideas weren't just stuck in books, were they?
No, not at all. They spread. Through pamphlets, coffee houses, salons, discussions, they moved from the intellectual elite into a wider public discourse. They gave people a way to articulate why things were unfair and to imagine a different kind of society.
Like the Declaration of the Rights of Man later on.
Exactly. That document, for August 1789, is almost a checklist of Enlightenment principles. Liberty, property, security, resistance to oppression. It's all in there. It turned cries for bread into demands for fundamental rights.
So we've got this perfect storm: economic disaster, social anger, and now these powerful revolutionary ideas providing a script. What was happening at the very top with the king and queen?
Well, the king, Louis VI, was really struggling to handle the financial mess. His attempts at reform kept getting blocked by the privilege orders.
Which led to him calling the Estates General.
Yes, in 1789, for the first time since 1614. It was kind of a desperate measure, but it backfired spectacularly.
How?
It basically gave a national stage for all those grievances to be aired. Representatives came from all over France, from all three estates, ready to demand change. It unintentionally focused all the discontent.
And the image of the monarchy wasn't helping, was it, Marie Antoinette?
No, definitely not. The perception, fair or not, was one of incompetence from the king and extravagance from the queen. Marie Antoinette got nicknamed Madame Deficit. Rumors about her spending, scandals like the diamond necklace affair, it all just eroded public trust completely.
Made them easy targets for anger.
Very much so. And you can't forget the American Revolution's impact.
Right, France helped the Americans win.
They did, which added massively to their debt, as we said.
Right.
But it also meant French soldiers, officers like Lafayette, went over there, fought alongside people demanding liberty and establishing a republic.
And they brought those ideas back.
They brought them back, yes. They'd seen republicanism in action. It wasn't just theory anymore. They came home to an absolute monarchy buckling under debt and inequality and thought, wait a minute.
So the American example showed it was possible.
It showed it was possible, and it kind of normalized the idea of challenging a monarch for self-government. It added another layer of inspiration, another reason to believe change could happen, a very important cross-pollination of revolutionary spirit, even as it bankrupted the French state.
Okay, so the stage is well and truly set. The pressure is immense. The dam finally broke. Let's walk through the actual events, the dramatic journey, starting with that early phase, say 1787 to 91, trying for a constitutional monarchy.
Right. It really kicks off with the Estates General in May 1789. The big problem was voting traditionally was by estate, not by head.
Meaning the first and second estates, the clergy and nobility, could always outvote the third estate, even though they were tiny minorities.
Exactly. So the third estate got frustrated, walked out, and declared themselves a National Assembly. That was a huge act of defiance.
And then the tennis court oath, June 20th.
Iconic moment. Yeah. They found themselves locked out of their meeting hall, moved to a nearby indoor tennis court, and swore an oath not to disband until France had a constitution, a direct challenge to the king's authority.
Wow. And then just weeks later, July 14th, the Bastille.
The storming of the Bastille, probably the most famous event. It wasn't just about freeing prisoners, there were only a handful. It was about seizing weapons and gunpowder, yes, but more importantly, attacking a powerful symbol of royal tyranny and arbitrary power.
And the effect was immediate.
Electrifying. It showed the people in Paris could impose their will. It forced the king to back down, recall this popular finance minister, Necker, and it sparked uprisings across the country.
Like the Great Fear.
Yes, the Great Fear in the summer is '89. Rumors spread in the countryside about aristocratic plots, causing panic. Peasants rose up, attacked manor houses, burned feudal documents.
Destroying the records of their obligations.
Precisely. This rural pressure forced the National Assembly, in a famous overnight session in August, to abolish feudal privileges, serfdom, special taxes, hunting rights. A massive social change.
On that same month, the Declaration of the Rights of Man.
Yes, laying out those core principles of liberty and equality, though, importantly, initially mostly for men.
Right, and then the Women's March on Versailles in October.
Crucial event. Thousands of Parisian women, furious about bread shortages, marched 12 miles to Versailles. They confronted the king and queen and ultimately forced the royal family to move back to Paris.
Putting them right in the heart of the revolution, under the eye of the people.
Exactly. Under public scrutiny, essentially prisoners in their own capital. This whole period culminates in the Constitution 1791, which created a constitutional monarchy, limited the king's power, set up a legislative assembly, theoretically a compromise.
But it didn't last long, did it? Things got much more radical, 1792 to 94.
Things spiraled quickly. The king's failed attempt to flee the country in June 1791, a flight to Varennes, destroyed any remaining trust. He was seen as a traitor.
And war broke out.
France declared war on Austria and Prussia in 1792. These external threats, combined with internal counter-revolutionary plots, radicalized everything. In August 92, the monarchy was overthrown. September, France was declared a republic.
And then the executions.
Yes. Louis XVI was tried for treason and executed by guillotine in January 1793. Marie Antoinette followed him in October. These were huge symbolic moments, breaking completely with the past.
Leading into the Reign of Terror.
The Reign of Terror, roughly from mid-1793 to mid-1794, this was the most infamous phase. The Committee of Public Safety, dominated by figures like Maximilien Robespierre and Saint-Just, took control.
Their goal was to save the revolution from its enemies.
That was the justification.
And
Enemies both foreign the ongoing wars and domestic royalists, moderates, anyone suspected of being counter-revolutionary.
the guillotine became the symbol.
It did. Thousands were executed. Estimates vary wildly, maybe 20,000 to 40,000 across France. It was a period of intense paranoia, suspicion, revolutionary tribunals, and summary justice, designed to be efficient, enlightened, but incredibly brutal.
While fighting off most of Europe at the same time.
Exactly. The Revolutionary Wars were raging. This external pressure fed the internal paranoia and the drive for extreme measures. Though, ironically, these wars also helped spread revolutionary ideas across Europe through French armies.
So, how did the terror end?
Eventually, the revolution began to devour its own. Robespierre himself became a target. People grew weary of the constant bloodshed and fear. In July 1794, the month of Thermidor in the Revolutionary calendar, Robespierre and his allies were overthrown and executed.
The Thermidorian reaction.
Right. It marked a shift away from radicalism. A new, more moderate government called the Directory was set up in 1795. 5 directors forming the executive.
But that wasn't stable either.
Not really. The Directory was plagued by corruption, inefficiency, ongoing wars, and political infighting. It struggled to maintain control.
Setting the stage
For a strong man, Napoleon Bonaparte, a successful young general, very popular. He saw his chance, staged a coup d'etat in November 1799, overthrew the Directory, and established the consulate with himself as first consul.
Basically a dictator.
Pretty much. And by 1804, he'd crowned himself emperor. So the revolution that started by overthrowing a king ended with an emperor. Though Napoleon did preserve and spread some revolutionary principles, like legal equality through the Napoleonic Code, but he definitely centralized power and ended the Republican experiment.
That whole trajectory from high ideals to terror to Napoleon, it's intense.
It really is. And it forces you to ask that fundamental question about revolutions. Is that descent into extremism, into something like the Reign of Terror, somehow inevitable when you try to overturn an entire social order so violently? Or was it a series of tragic mistakes?
What do the sources suggest?
Well, it's complex. You can certainly see the terror, from one critical perspective, as partly a defense mechanism. France was under attack, internally and externally. There were real threats, like the massive Royalist Vendée rebellion in the West that cost hundreds of thousands of lives. The Committee of Public Safety genuinely believed they were acting out of necessity to save the Republic.
But the cost was immense.
Immense. The sheer scale of the executions, the suspension of legal norms, it alienated huge numbers of people, even former supporters. And ultimately, you could argue it created the conditions for an authoritarian figure like Napoleon to come in and promise stability. The standard narrative often praises the early ideals and condemns the terror, but you have to see them as connected, as part of the same chaotic, fervent process of trying to remake a nation from the ground up, often at any cost.
That's a sobering thought. Let's talk about the people involved. Behind these huge events were individuals, right? Complex, maybe flawed.
Absolutely. Key figures who drove events or were swept up by them.
You start with Louis VI, obviously. His indecisiveness seems crucial.
Yes. His inability or unwillingness to embrace meaningful reform early on really did worsen the crisis. He seemed paralyzed by tradition and lacked the political skill to navigate the situation, ultimately leading to his own downfall.
And Marie Antoinette, scapegoat or symbol?
Probably a bit of both. Her image of extravagance, whether fully accurate or not, became a lightning rod for public anger against the monarchy's perceived indifference and excess.
Madame Deficit.
Then on the revolutionary side, Robespierre looms large.
Maximilien Robespierre, a fascinating figure, a lawyer deeply influenced by Rousseau, a real champion of virtue and equality, at least in theory. but also the driving force behind the terror, utterly convinced of his own righteousness, the incorruptible.
And his ally, Saint-Just.
Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just, even more radical, perhaps. Younger, uncompromising, known as the Archangel of Terror. He was relentless in pushing for executions and purges in the name of revolutionary purity.
And then Napoleon, ending it but also shaping his legacy. Napoleon Bonaparte, a military genius who rose through the ranks. He ended the Directory's chaos, brought stability, but also ended the Republic. Yet, his Napoleonic Code did codify things like legal equality, abolish feudalism where his armies went. So he spread some revolutionary ideas even while establishing his own empire.
What about earlier figures? Necker.
Jacques Necker, the Swiss banker, finance minister, very popular with the Third Estate for trying reforms, but ultimately couldn't overcome the resistance of the privileged orders.
And people like Danton or Desmoulins.
Georges Danton and Camille Desmoulins, powerful orators, early leaders. Desmoulins' speech arguably helped spark the Bastille storming. Danton was a major figure in the early Republic, but both eventually fell victim to the terror themselves. Shows how dangerous revolutionary politics became. And, what's really striking is how we still debate these figures. Robespierre, hero or villain, champion of the people or bloody dictator. The interpretations shift constantly.
And the focus often stays on these great men, doesn't it?
It does. And sometimes the establishment view, let's say, tends to overlook or downplay the role of ordinary people, the grassroots movements, like the sans-culottes in Paris.
Who were they, exactly?
Literally, without knee breeches. They were the working-class revolutionaries, artisans, shopkeepers, laborers. They wore long trousers, not the fancy knee breeches of the aristocracy. They were often the driving force behind the most radical moments. The storming of the Tuileries Palace, the demands for price controls, for direct democracy. Their pressure from below constantly pushed the revolution in more radical directions, sometimes further than the middle-class leaders wanted to go. Their story is crucial, too.
Okay, so after all that turmoil, that decade of upheaval, what was the lasting impact? What actually changed in France and beyond?
Well, politically, the biggest change was the complete destruction of the Ancien regime. The old system of monarchy, aristocracy, feudal privilege, gone.
Replaced by a republic, at least for a while.
Yeah. Yes. Even though it didn't stabilize immediately and led to Napoleon, the principle of popular sovereignty, that power resides with the people, was established. And the Declaration of the Rights of Man became this foundational document for human rights globally. Its influence is huge.
But the failure to create a stable republic is also part of that legacy, right? Leading to Napoleon's autocracy.
Absolutely. It's a mixed political legacy.
Yeah.
Huge democratic advances in theory, but instability and eventually autocracy in practice, at least in the short term.
What about socially and economically?
Massive changes there, too. Abolishing feudalism was enormous. It freed peasants from old obligations, and significant land redistribution happened, empowering them economically. The power of the Catholic Church was also drastically reduced through secularization policies, losing land and influence.
And the bourgeoisie, the middle class.
They were arguably the biggest winners. Wealthy, educated commoners. They gained enormous political and economic power, displacing the old aristocracy. It really reshaped France's social structure for the long haul.
And the global ripples. You mentioned those earlier.
Immense. The French Revolution directly inspired other uprisings, most notably the Haitian Revolution starting in 1791, the only successful large-scale slave revolt leading to an independent nation. It terrified slaveholders everywhere.
And later European revolutions.
Yes, the ideas of 1789 echoed through the European revolutions of 1830 and 1848. Liberty, equality, fraternity. These became watchwords for reformers and revolutionaries everywhere. It fueled liberalism, socialism, nationalism. Many modern political isms trace roots back here.
Even through Napoleon's wars.
Paradoxically, yes. As Napoleon's armies marched across Europe, they dismantled feudal structures and imposed elements of French law, spreading revolutionary principles. But they also provoked strong nationalist reactions against French domination, helping forge modern national identities in places like Germany and Spain.
Culturally, too, right? Symbols, art.
Definitely. Enduring symbols like the guillotine, unfortunately, but also the La Marseillaise anthem. Think of the paintings of Jacques-Louis David, capturing revolutionary moments, and later literature, like Dickens and Edam's Tale of Two Cities, grappling with its drama and horror. It left a deep cultural mark. So if you try to connect all that to the bigger picture, the legacy is just profoundly dual-edged, isn't it? It's this incredible story of liberation, the birth of modern democratic ideals, the assertion of human rights, but also a story of terrifying violence, instability, the terror, and ultimately the rise of a military dictator who launched wars across Europe. is both inspiring and cautionary.
Different interpretations emphasize different aspects.
Yeah, exactly. Marxist historians might focus on it as a bourgeois revolution, clearing the way for capitalism. Revisionists often highlight the chaos, the loss of life, how Napoleon's empire kind of betrayed the original egalitarian ideals. It really resists any single easy interpretation. It's a story of profound contradictions.
What a journey. From those Enlightenment ideals of liberty, equality, fraternity, through the firestorm of revolution, the terror, the guillotine, ultimately leading to Napoleon's empire. It's just immense. This decade really did shake the foundations of France and the world, didn't it? And it laid the groundwork for so many ideas and conflicts we still grapple with today. Human rights, democracy, nationalism, the very nature of revolution itself. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into such a critical, complex moment in history.
Well, if you think about it, the French Revolution dared to do something extraordinary, to completely tear down an ancient system based on radical new ideas about humanity. But that journey from enlightened philosophy to brutal violence and then circling back to a new kind of autocracy, it really forces us to ask, doesn't it? Is profound societal transformation always doomed to wrestle with these kinds of radical excesses? Or is there actually a way to achieve fundamental change without sacrificing the very principles you started with?